Hey guys, welcome back to my video. This is probably like my 10th take. I'm just really out of touch, out of practice. I took a break for like 2 weeks again because it was my birthday. So apologies if I'm being super clumsy, but for this week we are going to be making another cake, and it is going to be based off of one of my favorite horror movies, The Witch. It didn't come out too long ago, but it's basically a period movie based in New England in the 1600s, around the time of the Salem witch trials, and it follows a family as they decide to like homestead on their own and face the forces of evil and whatnot. And the character I chose was Black Phillip. I'm gonna go ahead and insert his picture here. Yes, he is a goat, so he's a very foreboding figure in the movie, and the symbolism is quite obvious. Nevertheless, he is beautiful, and I've always admired him, and I decided that I really wanted to replicate him in cake form, just because he looks so badass and motherfucking scary. Now, before we get started, I do want to mention how terrified I am of doing this cake, because if you've seen my previous videos, which you should, you know that the very few cakes that I've made are based off of kind of like mythical fantasy horror type creatures, and nothing really based in the reality that we know today. And not only is it an animal, a very real animal, it's a goat. And like, I've looked at hundreds of pictures of goats, and they all have this oblong, triangular shaped head that just seems really awkward for me to replicate. So I am super nervous. So follow me along this very interesting and hesitant journey. So feel free to say whatever you want in the comments, but we're doing this. So for the cake itself, well, the outside will be black fondant, but I wanted the inside black as well. I'll still be using this white cake mix that I bought. I bought like a grip of these, and I'm going to be mixing in this black Dutch cocoa powder. So it's like cocoa powder but extra dark. It says to use like a 1/4 cup of this for every box of cake mix, and it should come out pretty dark. The cake mix gives you ratios if you have real eggs and if you have egg whites, which is great. I have both, and I also only have 3 eggs. So we are going to see how this turns out. Where the F is my shit? Why? It's because I'm done. Okay. Dang. So yeah, it's like super dark. Wow, it looks like charcoal powder. Let's see how it turns out. But this is kind of insane looking, and I love it. So like I said, I'm pretty nervous about making this cake. I was kind of putting him off, and then my husband and I recently came to a life decision, potential decision, that made me want to do this cake. We currently live in Los Angeles right now, and we lived in Southern California our entire lives. We've always felt like it's just like not the city for us. Can you tell I'm a Valley girl? I say like a lot. By the way, this looks like super amazing. Getting really stoked about it. But yeah, it's just really hot and not our thing, and we always wanted to like move north. And our first choice was actually Portland, Oregon, or Seattle, Washington. And we've been up there a few times, and we were actually scouting out neighborhoods. Like, we were serious, y'all. But then after watching the movie Pig, we were reminded of something that we had forgotten and pushed into the absolute recesses of our mind, because the movie takes place in Pig, where the main character, Nicolas Cage, mentions the big one. And the big one is the long overdue Portland earthquake. Now, coming from Los Angeles, we have a lot of earthquakes. And anybody who says that they're used to earthquakes is a liar or an edgelord. Because earthquakes are just nerve-wracking. Like, it's not fun. And apparently the one in Portland is supposed to be like up to 9.0, maybe even a 10, worst case scenario. And it's supposed to happen in the next 35 years, but it really actually is overdue. So that, because we're trying to find a place to live for like the next 30 years. Portland might not be it then, as disappointing as that is. So we were looking at other places and we decided to look more into New England, specifically like Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Maine, looking at like indexes and stats and percentages of what the standard of living is like in those areas. We also saw some videos of people going to Salem, Massachusetts, which has always been a dream of mine. Just really resonated with us, and so it's a lot farther than we had originally intended to move to, but we're kind of stoked about it. And then it just made me think of The Witch, because it takes place in New England, seeing like the scenery and the environment of the Northeast, that I'm pretty excited to make this cake now. Thank goodness, because I was really nervous about it. I went ahead and took out my other 9-inch springform pan. I should probably invest in either more pans or maybe like how they do it on those cake shows where it comes out like a giant sheet cake. That'd probably be best. I'll look into that. Layer 2. Okay. So the cakes are now done, and look at that. You can tell that I did not mix my flour completely into the wet mixture. Shame on me, but it's probably also because I should sift the cake mix batter. But they look really dark, which I'm very happy about. Today I feel super haggard and too lazy to put my face on or do my hair, so we're just gonna make this frosting showing the lower half. Already got my butter at room temperature. Okay, I ended up putting in another tablespoon of the dark cocoa powder, and it came out like a pretty great gray. I also changed because even if you're making an all black cake, it's not good to wear all black. I'm going to put in a few drops of this useless black food coloring, so let's see what happens. As with my other attempts using this food coloring, pretty much nothing, but that's okay because I do like the look of this gray. Okay, now this big old foiled baby is all the layers of cake I had made yesterday, and we took off like a test piece to try it because it was kind of like deformed anyways, and we wanted to try, we as in me and my husband wanted to try if it tastes any good. And it does, tastes super good. But now we are going to attempt to sculpt this goat head. Let me just get a cutting board and figure out how the F I'm supposed to do this. Getting my turntable because I feel like it would make things easier even though it probably wouldn't. And I'm just gonna lightly frost between each layer, not too much. And I'm not gonna go all the way to the edge because I know I'll want to use some of that outside edge to use for like the ears and the horns. There's the basic cake, which looks absolutely horrifying right now, but now we're gonna do the next step. So the first thing I'm gonna do is just a very simple like silhouette of the goat head. This is the reference picture I'm using. It's like a 3D file. Okay, here we go.
This is actually kind of painful to watch, and I've sped it up because it was such an ordeal and definitely the most stressful part of making this cake. I ended up wasting so much sponge and I really didn't want to. Of course, I'll be using the sponge for another project hopefully, but it was just kind of an ordeal and kind of a mess, to be honest.
It's an absolute catastrophe, isn't it? Okay, I think I have the basic shape of the goat head down now. I'm stress eating, but it's fine. We are going to clean it up so it's not so overwhelming and carry on. I'm not tripping. Are you tripping? I'm not tripping.
2 hours later.
And we're back. Everything's cleaned up for the most part, so that was kind of a travesty. But we are going to soldier on and not think about how stressful that was and how much cake scraps I just ate. But alright, we have a ton of frosting that we could layer on thick of this bad boy. I ended up having kind of a mini meltdown yesterday because I just got really overwhelmed with the sculpting of the goat head, and that wasn't even surprising really. I kind of expected it to be just a really clumsy situation. And I ended up eating a ton of the cake sponge and frosting to cope, which don't feel great about that, but it's okay. Time has passed. I should learn new coping mechanisms. But today is a brand new day and we are going to work on actually covering the head with fondant and putting in the details so that it just we're just soldiering on. That's what we're doing at this point. Here's some new challenges. Taking out all the black fondant that I have on hand. This is from the Xenomorph. This was from, the Niffler. That's a while back. And then I have like a whole extra block. I feel like I'm gonna be using a lot of it. So let's roll these babies out. Here we go. Okay. Well, I know it covers it completely. Okay, so you could probably see, like, I kind of pressed into his skull a little bit so that I can have like a guide of where the eyes should go. But I'm gonna go in, this is the extra fondant I had cut off around like the excess. And I'm going to go in and kind of give him like his little face details, not so much the fur yet, but like his nose and his mouth and like his eyelids, as well as like the points where his ears and horns would begin. These eyes I'm actually going to dip into like yellow meltable chips, but I'm just going to use this as a stand-in for now until I'm ready to really put in all his details. Once I have his eyes down, I can put his eyelid.
I went ahead and added some extra fondant around the eyelid area as well as on his nose bridge. I thought it would give him more dimension, and I kind of tested out what his fur would look like by sculpting into it, and I think it came out pretty decent. I could see him finally coming to shape. Next up were his ears. I wasn't too worried about getting them too symmetrical. Also, I wanted to make them completely out of fondant, so if my grubby little hands seem a little too involved with his ears, it would not be one of the edible parts of the cake.
And to make the horns, I made this like mixture of the cake batter and the frosting. I believe this is what they use to make cake pops. I thought it'd be easier to shape rather than having to like cut out pieces of sponge to make the horn and then lay fondant on top. So I'm just gonna use this, and then I'm gonna mold it into the horn shape and then lay the fondant on top of this.
I used that same cake pop clay, if you can say, to make the base for where his goatee would go. I thought it would be lighter and easier to work with than a whole chunk of fondant. Then came laying down the beard hairs across his face, but you'll see that I'm actually going to change this up later on in the video. to be honest, I was feeling a little better about it yesterday, and then by the end of that day, I was kind of feeling like I was really not happy with it again. Sorry if you hear footsteps, that's just my dog. Thankfully, I have a super supportive husband who always picks me up when I'm feeling a little down or insecure. So I went ahead and kind of sculpted out his face a little bit. Like, it looked a little too football-y, which was actually my worst nightmare come true. And I went ahead and kind of made sure that I was happier with the actual sculpt of his face. So if you take a look at it, you can see that I kind of cut where like his cheeks are. Like, instead of having the first start closer to his nose bridge, I kind of cut it down. For the eyes, instead of making them black, because black fondant is what I have, I thought I'd make them yellow. So I bought those candy melts, and I'm gonna heat this up or just a little bit in the microwave, make the eyeball out of fondant and dip them in. Hopefully it works. This is also something that I've been stress eating during this project. It really doesn't help that they're just in like the perfect snacking form. First, I'm gonna roll out the size of his eyeballs. I had made them earlier, but because they were sitting out, they started to crack and they were too difficult to work with. So I'm just gonna start from scratch again. And I'm actually going to make them smaller than I had originally planned, because I realized that the meltable candy coating is going to make them much thicker than I realized. They're actually going to be maybe like half the size that I had originally rolled out. So I melted just a little bit of the candy melt to dip that fondant in. I have a chopstick because I don't have toothpicks, but I always have chopsticks. Going to put the little fondant eyeball on the end of it, dip it in. So one goat eye has dried. Now just to insert it into his socket. That's what she said. Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and put his little pupil or iris. If you've ever seen a goat's eye, you know that its iris is like a line instead of a dot like humans have. Apologies for my dirty looking fingers. I swear it's the dye from the black fondant. But okay, there are the eyes. They look a little wonky, but I mean, I think goat eyes are always wonky. Now's the fun part where I actually get to paint him using this airbrush white again to give him the beautiful highlights he deserves. And here he is in his final form, all completed. I will say it was kind of an ordeal and I had just a few stressed out moments, but I'm pretty okay with how he turned out in the end. Let's get to slicing.
Okay, here he is. Pretty dark inside. So the color came out great, and I have black all over myself, just like the entire time. But I'm really happy with how it came out in terms of like the layers. I obviously already know what it tastes like because I stress ate a bunch of this already. But this is more of like a celebratory slice of cake. It's kind of crazy how just like a quarter cup of cocoa powder will really make it super chocolatey. Usually I have an issue with chocolate cake that it's not chocolatey enough. I could definitely use more, but I'm just kind of surprised by how like effective it is. But really good, really moist. Maybe a little too moist to work with when sculpting, but can't really complain. I guess one of the biggest flaws I have with this is that I didn't sift the flour and the cocoa powder, which made for like the little white dots in the cake. But the flavor is the same. Like you couldn't even tell that that was a mistake unless you're looking right at it. Wasn't super thrilled, but it's my first time doing something that looks a little bit more realistic. Here's to more cake making adventures. If you made it to the very end, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more videos. I have a few ideas in mind for my next cake, and I'm actually super excited about it. So I hope that you can join me along for the ride. All right, see you guys next time. Bye. Say hi, Peanut. Peanut, say hi.